Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tech Gig webinar series, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is Managing Resource Allocations in Project 2010. Our guest speaker today is Mr. B. Sai Prasad. Mr. B. Sai Prasad, Senior Manager Learning and Development, has been with the service provider Cognizant Technology Solutions India Private Limited since 2001, where he was named winner of the company's Global Trainer of the Year award. He has conducted 7,000 plus hours of training in technical and project management topics and has trained around 4,000 plus practitioners on project management concepts, risk management, scheduling, estimation techniques, and Microsoft Office project. He is a certified PMP, PMI SP, and champion of project management PMI India. He is also working with Project Management Institute Education Foundation, that is PMIEF, for promoting project management concepts to colleagues. He has participated as a speaker, panelist in many PMI REPs and chapters events. He is a Microsoft Certified Technology Specialist, that is MCTS, in Project 2007 and Project 2010. He started the first Microsoft Project User Group India chapter to promote and help practitioners within and outside India on Microsoft Office project. He is also the editor of project management book Forecast Scheduling with Microsoft Project 2010. He is a vivid blogger and you can read his posts at www.sainivas.com. You can reach him via email. His email ID is sai@sainivas.com. So without further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker. Over to you, Mr. Prasad.
Thank you. Hello everybody. So I welcome you all for this 1-hour webinar on managing those conflicts as well as how to resolve those conflicts using Microsoft Project 2010. So before we get into the program, I would like to assess where you are from and what is your current role you are playing in your projects. So there is a poll shown on your current screen. I request each one of you to select the relevant option which might be sufficient for you. I'm giving another 5 seconds. Okay, good. So thanks to everybody. We have a majority of them are project managers. We have few program managers and grade 3 members also. So thank you guys. So coming back to the tool on Microsoft Project, as you ideally know, there are different versions of project that is there in the market. So the second poll I have is, what version of project are you currently using? I'm giving another 10 seconds. Okay, thank you guys. So majority of them have said we are using Project 2007 followed by Project 10 and Project 2003. We have 24% who are totally new to Microsoft Project. Good. So thanks for your responses. Now let's move ahead and let's get started. So if you look at managing projects, right? So if you look at the picture what I'm going to show you now, these are the different buildings across the world. So if you think what is common across all these buildings, ideally all of these buildings have been planned well and they have some kind of an architectural model before they started any of these projects. So if we try to relate of the schedule what we are going to build to these architecture models, you can say a schedule is more like an architecture model which is ideally a small three-dimensional version of your final building. So it is very, very important that the schedule is always a forecastable and it is always realistic in nature. So the key takeaways of this topic would be on the importance of adding resource information and how it is helps us to optimize our resources. Followed by we will talk about how to find over-allocations with respect to your project. And third, we will also talk about how to level the workloads by yourself. And finally, we will talk about how to level workloads by project itself. First, there are a few fundamentals we need to remember before we start identifying over-allocations in the project. So the first thing is every project ideally needs to have a team and team members to start executing these activities. Each team member, apart from their skill set, name, and cost information, every resource will ideally have a calendar associated with it. So if you look at Microsoft Project 2010, which is what the topic is going to be, there is an option available through which you can customize the working time of the individual resources. So the way you can do it is go to the resource, that is the project ribbon, and you need to select a change working time. So let me give you a small demo of how this can be done. So what you are currently looking at is the project 2010, where you have an interface, a tab-based interface. So this is what we generally call as a ribbon in project 2010. So if I have a resource, let's say a resource called Sai, the way you add it is go to the View tab and you have a button called the Resource Sheet. So through the resource sheet, you can go ahead, type the name of the resource which you want to include as a part of your team, and just go back to your project and you can find there is a button called Change Working Time. So you can select Change Working Time, which will allow you to look at the working time of that current resource. So currently you can see this resource works from 8 to 12, 1 to 5 with respect to the company. So this is ideally the way where you can look at the working time, and there are work weeks. As an example, let's say if I want to set the working time from 9 to 1 and 2 to 6. The way to do it is you need to go to the work weeks tab on the bottom, and you can see by work weeks we are trying to say the default working time of the resource. You can see the working time is currently being displayed on the right here, and that is based on the default work week. So I'm just going to the work week default. I can click on details, where you can select the weekdays which you want to ideally change. So I'm going for the third radio button, where I will say it is 9 a.m. to, let's say, 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. So this is the approach which you need to ideally follow to configure their working time. But if I want to make 16th of August as a holiday, you can go to the exceptions tab and you can say holiday, which means that particular day will be automatically made as a holiday with respect to that resource. So going back to the slides, so these are the two options what we now discussed. So every resource will have a calendar that is associated with it. More than the calendar, another information which you can configure at a resource level is the availability of the resource at a project level. So if I go back to my project again, I can just double click the resource what I've just added. You can find there's a small table called resource availability table. By default, project assumes every resource is available throughout the year and is allocated 100%. So you can try to put a criteria saying is allocated only from this week till end of this week 100%. So what does this signify? When I hit the OK button, and if I change my current view to a view called resource usage or resource graph, you would be able to find on those days the resources allocated to your project. Which means if you give work to that resource outside this boundary, you will be flagged as an over-allocated resource. So this is the point what we just discussed. But the catch in Microsoft project is, though we configure both the calendar as well as the availability, Microsoft project schedules work for a resource only based on their calendar but not based on their availability. This means you might try to give some work even outside the boundary to which he is allocated. Naturally, the red color bar indicates that the resource is ideally overallocated. So project does not consider if the resources are within the availability of the resources or not. So it is due to these reasons, it is very important that we identify which resources are overallocated and how to resolve it. So the next point which I would like to mention is there's different scenarios due to which resources are getting overallocated. One of the common scenarios I can see here is we try to give some work that is more than their availability. If you have just looked at the previous slide, I hope you can see that the work was given outside the availability period. That's one common cause. The second cause is the resource is working on more than 2 parallel activities during the same week and more than 100%. So this could be another reason why resources are getting overallocated. So when we talk about resource optimization or resource leveling, it is ideally a process of resolving the overallocation of each of the individual resources to make sure your schedule is more realistic and maintainable. So the next activity we are going to discuss is the different options that we traditionally follow for doing resource leveling. So one of the options you can think about is adding or removing or replacing resources. The second one is you can also look at splitting or delaying long activities into shorter ones. And the third option may be you might want to configure the calendar or maybe adjust the availability period so that you are able to meet the target. And the last one, maybe you can look at delaying an activity or delaying the assignment. So these are some of the options what we generally discuss when we talk about the scheduling theory. But when it comes to practice in Microsoft Project 2010, I can say if you want to take action, there are two ways by which you can look at resolving and taking action in terms of resolve conflicts. So the first one is more the task related features where you can look at the Gantt chart view and the task usage view. And the second one is more resource related features where we have a few reports views available like resource sheet, team planner, and the resource allocation view through which we will be able to do it. Fine. So now let's take a live example to understand how it works. So the first example I'm going to take is the Gantt chart view, which you need to use for identifying which tasks are having overallocated resources. So let me change my application to project. You're able to find that currently I have a set of activities, and these activities have some effort, there is the work, we have some duration. We have also linked these activities and we have a few resources also. You might be able to find some of these activities are having a red colored stick man in the first column. The first column is what we generally call as the indicators column. So the red color indicates that these resources are overallocated. So even the tooltip will read that this task is having a resource assigned which is overallocated. So the way we need to resolve this problem is maybe we can just look at doing a right click here. The moment you right click that particular row that is having an overallocated resource, project gives you two options. The first option is what we call as task inspector option. The second option is it will automatically reschedule the task to the next available date of the particular resource. So let me go for the task inspector option first. So when you click on the task inspector, on the left hand side you see a task inspector pane that lists the name of the task what I select. Along with it gives you which resource is having the problem. And it gives you a few options like the factor that is affecting that particular task. When I say factors, how is the start date and the finish date of that particular task is calculated. Currently it is calculated based on its predecessor, which is your conduct workshop. and ideally it is having based on the calendar of those two resources, that is architect 2 and the offshore business analyst. So here if you look at the option called repair options, there are two buttons available for us. The first button is what we call as reschedule task, which means it will find the next available date of the offshore business analyst and it will reschedule the task accordingly. So let's see what happens if I go for the first button. So I want everybody to focus on the right side to see how the tasks are now getting delayed. So let me click on reschedule task. Now you would be able to observe the feasibility task got pushed to a later date and the red color stickman would have disappeared because business analyst is not over allocated in this case. But if you want to look for the second task to be delayed, let me undo this change and let me select the prepare SRS document. You can find the prepare SRS is being displayed on my task inspector and I can just click on the reschedule task button here. So in this case the third task is getting pushed to a later date. So as you can ideally see, this is a very simple approach but might not be an effective approach. Reason being, when you try to delay an activity, you need to look for options without delaying your critical path. But if you are not looking at critical path at the first go, maybe you want to push this task to a later date, I think this is an ideally an easy option available to us. The second option available to you is more with respect to ignoring problems of that particular task. What I mean by that is, let's say we don't want to push this finish date of the project. When I say the finish date of the project, which is the last activity's date, to a later date, maybe you just want to ignore the problem of these two tasks. Then you can just right click that particular row and you can say ignore problems for a particular task, which means the red color district man will automatically disappear. So which means you can just proceed, but still the resource is over allocated, but you are not really worried about that scenario. So in case if you want to get that red color stick man again, make sure that you use this inspect option, which is on the task ribbon, where you can say show ignored problems, where you are able to get that red color stick man. So this is an option which you might ideally use when you are working with a Gantt chart view available in Microsoft Project. The second one is ideally not a view, rather a report. A lot of times we would like to take a report in terms of the list of resources who are over allocated in your project. So the way to do it is you need to go to the project ribbon where you can find a button called reports. So the moment you click on these reports, you will be able to find several categories of reports available. So make sure that you are going in for the assignments report. When you click on assignments, you have a report called overallocated. So let me say overallocated and let me view it. So as you can see, these are the two resources who are overallocated with respect to this current project. So the only catch with the tabular reports what we have now seen is this report can only be printed to a printer. Okay, so you cannot export it to an Excel or something where you can manipulate it later. So this is what we just discussed. Go to the project ribbon and you can click on the reports and assignments option. The next one is what we call as the resource sheet view. I hope we have already talked about the resource sheet earlier. So if you can go to the view ribbon where you can click on resource sheet, or you can go to the resource ribbon and you can pull this drop down where you can select the resource sheet. In both scenarios, you will get the same set of resources that has been added to your project. You can find there are two resources who are in red color and they are angry with us. And you can also find there is a small yellow color option in the first indicators column. This indicates that the resource is ideally over allocated and it should be leveled. Okay. So the only problem we are having here with respect to this view is you cannot be able to know on which task this resource is over allocated. But at least this gives you an indication whether we have any resources over allocated or not. Okay. So going back to the Gantt chart, right? So as I've already pointed out, this is more grouped by tasks, whereas if you look at the resource sheet, it is more by resources. Okay. So ideally make use of this resource leveling indicator on the first column to find out which resources are having that overallocation problem. The next view which you might want to understand is the team planner view. Remember, team planner is a view available only in Project 2010 professional version. So if you are using Microsoft Project 2010 standard, this view might not be available to you. So if you are an Outlook user, maybe you would have seen scheduling meeting invites and looking at calendars of your colleagues through the Outlook. So your team planner will be looking very similar to your Outlook calendar, where you have your resources on your left and the task that is being assigned to your right hand side. So the way to access your team planner is back to the same resource ribbon and click on the team planner button. So the moment you click on team planner, you have the list of resources names on the leftmost corner. You're also able to find the set of tasks that are scheduled to it. If you closely observe the business analyst and the architect, you can find that days when they are overallocated will have a red color border, indicating that those tasks are ideally creating an overallocation. Another benefit of using the team planner is when you do a mouse over on top of any of those tasks, there are a lot of key information that is displayed on that tooltip. So please take some time to read through some of those labels. The last statement here will clearly tell you what is the relationship between its predecessor and successor and what is its task bar. So if I just move to the last activity, you are able to see the set of activities that are generally connected to it. So which means before preparing a detailed architecture, you have another activity that is getting connected to it. Now, if I want to resolve this problem, one of the simple ways I do recommend is follow the drag and drop option. Okay. Remember, this feature is not available through any other views in Microsoft Project. So let's say if I want to move this feasibility to, let's say, the business analyst, to the on-site business analyst, because he is available during the time, I can just select one of the tasks you want to move, and I can just move it, and I can drop it here. So the moment you drag and drop, you can see the overallocation of business analyst would have resolved automatically. And another way is you can also look at right-clicking that particular task which is having that overallocation. So let me undo the change. So let's say if you are looking at moving the feasibility of offshore business analyst to another resource on your project, just right-click and you can say reassign it to whom. So let's say if I'm reassigning it to architect 1, yeah, you are able to find architect automatically moves to architect 1. So this is also another neat and a nice way by which you can resolve this conflict. The third approach is, let's say if you want to push this task to a later date when the resource is available. So typically you want to push this to a date which starts from Tuesday to Friday. So the way to do it is make sure you select the task which you want to push, and you can just go to the move option on the task ribbon where you can say reschedule the task to when the resource is available. So let me say when resources are available. You would ideally be able to see that one of those tasks is getting pushed to a later date. So if this is what your requirement is, right, naturally you will, you can ideally make use of this move option to do it. So as you can see, the team planner is a way by which you can visualize your overallocation. At the same time, you can move your resources to different tasks more by a drag and drop feature. Planner, the overallocations are displayed in a red line, and you can reassign it to a different resource. At the same time, you can move it to a day when the resource is available. The third option might be, which I didn't discuss, is You can also make use of the move option to say move it after 1 week. Okay, let me say I can say move it after 1 week. Uh, so as you can see, it moves prepare SRS to 1 week later, due to which other activities are also getting pushed to a later date. So these are some of the options which you can ideally make use of when it comes to a team planner. The next one which I just want to spend is on the resource overallocation view. Chart view, the resource sheet or the team planner does give information about overallocation and also gives you options to resolve the problems. But this might not be sufficient because you might want to look at on what day the resource is overallocated, how many hours is he overallocated on the individual days, so that you want to take a case-by-case scenario and want to resolve it. So the way to do it is go back to either the resource or to the view and search for a view called resource allocation view. So I'm just going to pull this drop down and I'm going to say more views, where you can go for a view called resource allocation. So when you say resource allocation view, you have the resource usage. It is ideally talks about the set of assignments that are grouped under resources. In this example, you can find the offshore business analyst is assigned to 2 activities, and the total effort of this particular resource in the project is 32 hours, which is divided between these 2 tasks as 16 hours and 16 hours. Similarly, architect 1 is working only on 1 activity for 16 hours. So the advantage of making use of the resource usage is you will be able to precisely know how might be overallocated or how many hours is he working on the individual task. So when you select the rows on the resource usage, you might observe the leveling Gantt which is on the bottom might also change accordingly. So if I select row 3, you are able to find on my leveling Gantt the 2 assignments of that particular resource as been listed on the bottom. So the purpose of making use of leveling Gantt is, though usage will provide you a numerical representation of the assignment, whereas leveling Gantt will provide you a graphical representation of that assignment here. Let's get into action and let's try to resolve this particular problem. So if you look at the offshore business analyst, he is working on 2 activities. Let's say if you like to push this activity, let's say after a couple of days, the way you can do it is you can just double click the activity you want to push. In this case, prepare SRS. So I'm just double clicking that task, which opens up the assignment information of the resource, where I can ideally say this activity will start on July, let's say July 4th. So let me say July 4th. Okay, and I don't need to worry about the finish date of that task here because I'm trying to push only that particular assignment, and the finish date will get recalculated automatically. The moment I do it, you are able to find that task is getting pushed to originally scheduled work. On those days, project automatically schedules 0 effort. Because I have pushed this activity by 3 days, right, you would be able to observe that this particular activity's assignment start would have pushed to a later date. Okay, so let me undo this change. In case if you want to find a simpler way by which let's say if you want to have a simpler way by which you want to resolve this particular problem, the way you can do it is you can just look at the leveling Gantt on the bottom, and on the prepare SRS, let's say if I want to push it to by, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, by 5 days, naturally I can just enter 5 days in my prepare SRS, which means the second activity will get pushed to a later date. So the difference between making use of the assignment information and the leveling Gantt is input all the assignments to a new date, whereas when you operate on the assignment information, it will get pushed only to a date where that assignment wants to start. Okay. Okay, so this is one of the approaches which you ideally follow for resolving that problem. So let me try to resolve this. So let me say for offshore business analyst, I want it to be pushed by to a later date, and let me push it by, let's say, third. Okay, so I'm just pushing it to a later date. Okay. Now, if you look at architect 1, he is said to be over-allocated. So if you are working on a very large project plans, it's quite difficult to find where that resource is over-allocated. This is where you might make use of the option called go to next over-allocation. You can find this option on the resource ribbon. So the advantage is the moment you click on this option, project will automatically scroll the time phase portion to the day when that resource is over-allocated. So in this case, you might find the resource is over-allocated on these 2 days. That is on July 5th and July 6th. If you want to resolve this problem, naturally you might want to look at the availability of that particular resource. So let me say I want to change this availability to a later date. So let me double click architect 1. When you double click architect 1, you can find the available from is 1st of June, and he is released in the project at the end of June itself, whereas work is given him on the first week of July. So let me push it to, let's say, July 10th, and let's see what happens. Now you are able to find it resolved. Good. So just to summarize the options what we have seen to resolve the overallocations manually is we might either make use of the Gantt chart view, okay, through which you can look at the inspector task and want to look at the resource sheet to find out which resources are overallocated. The third one is we might want to look at the team planner by which you can drag and drop task, or you might want to reassign it to a later date based on your choice. And the last one is the resource overallocation view, which will give you more micro level details about the assignment so that you can selectively look at how to resolve the problems. Now comes the most important part of Microsoft project, where we are more automatic fashion. Okay. So let me go back to my project and let me close some of my plans. Now you are able to find I have a set of activities here called conduct workshop, feasibility, SRS, analysis, and project completed. Now I'm just going to talk about something more important from the point of optimization, which means you might want to delay an activity without affecting the project finish date. This means you want to know the critical path of your current project. So the way to enable the critical path in your current project is you can just right click on your chart area, which is your right hand side, and you can go to the show or hide bar styles and can say critical task. So the moment you say critical task, project will automatically highlight the critical path in your project. But by default, it might not give you the labels, that is the task name or the resource names of those critical activities. So to format it, I am going to the format ribbon where I can click on the format button. I can go for bar styles. Because I want to customize my styles of the bars, I go here where I can scroll down and I can just look for the word called critical, which means by default for critical tasks, to the left and the right, nothing is displayed. But I want the name to be displayed on the left, maybe the resource names to be displayed to its right. Okay, so I want the same change to be happening even for my non-critical activities, so let me do that. Now we are able to observe for by both critical as well as my non-critical activities, both the names and the resource names are now displayed. Now comes the challenge. You would ideally want to delay the activity in the project where I think offshore business analyst is over allocated without delaying your project. Remember, you can go and try out the same approaches what we discussed before. That is, you can right click on that particular row, and you can, when you reschedule it to the next available date, you might find your project will get automatically stretched to a due date. So what I recommend is, instead of using this option, we will try to go for some automatic leveling options in Microsoft Project. So let me go back to my slides. So ideally, project can do resource leveling by either delaying an activity or by splitting a task, and that's what we are going to look at. Please do remember, when you are working on Microsoft Project, there are three types of resources that can be added in project. That is the work, material, and cost resource. So when you do automatic leveling, it is only the work resources that are considered for leveling, and the material resources are excluded. Let's look at how do we do it. So I'm going back to my project, and let me click on the resource ribbon. You can find there is an option called leveling options. Okay, so the leveling options, what you are trying to see here, this is the brain of automatic leveling. So you just need to remember how to use this. So if you look at the dialog box, it has three sections. That is leveling calculations, leveling range, and resolve overallocations. In leveling calculations, you have two radio buttons, automatic and manual. When you say manual, Microsoft Project will identify overallocation and it will spot it, but it will not resolve it automatically. Whereas if you go for an automatic option, the moment there is a resource overallocation, project will try to use an algorithm to resolve the conflict automatically. So the algorithm is basically decided by the factors you see in the third section. Okay. So if you want to do a one-time automatic leveling, I recommend you go for the manual option. But if you want the leveling to be done automatically every time, then go for the automatic option. So in this demonstration, I will stick on to manual. The second section says, whenever you go for a manual or automatic, what is the range entire project, or do you want it for a given date? So now in this case, I go for a entire project. The third one is what is more important for us. This is a leveling order. This is ideally used as a priority by which task could be selected for delaying. Now if you look at the three values in this drop down, it says ID only, it says standard, it says priority, standard. When you say ID only, okay, what project does is, when you have two parallel activities, the task that comes last will always be delayed. So in this example, you can see there are two parallel activities, feasibility and prepare SRS. So project will always delay the prepare SRS, though it falls on the critical path. And let me have a quick demo of what happens now. So I'm saying ID only, and you should not hit the OK button. Instead, I'm just going to do a level all. You would now observe my prepare SRS is getting pushed, though that don't go for the ID only in case if you are not giving priority based on the row IDs of that particular task. So let's look at the second option. Instead of ID, I recommend go for this standard. When I say standard, activity that falls on the critical path, non-critical path will be delayed here. So let me say standard and let me say level now. Now you are able to find, though my critical path was getting stretched, but it was not so big like the earlier one. The reason is because you might see my non-critical path, that is my feasibility activity, got pushed to a later date. So this is the second option which you ideally want to remember. The third one is also important. So in case if you want to look at using the priority values of the individual activities before looking at their slack or the float value, every activity what you see here will generally have a feasibility, right? Every activity will have a priority attached to it. You can see if I double click the feasibility, you can see there is a field called priority. Higher the value, higher the priority, which means if I have feasibility as 1000 here, which means this activity will not be delayed in MS project. So based on your requirement, you might want to either choose ID only, standard, or priority comma standard. So if the priority of both these tasks are same, then it will look at the slack value of that particular activity. So in this example, I am going with standard. Okay. So once I have selected standard, right, and I say level all, you might find my project finish date is getting pushed because you can see my dates are getting changed automatically. So there are a lot of requirements what people might have, that they don't want to push this task to a later date. Rather, they want to split this task so that you are doing the feasibility in pieces. So I'm just going to go to the same level resources option, and I'm just going to look at the first option here, which says level only within available slack, which means the feasibility activity should be delayed only within its available slack without affecting my project finish date. So let me try if I can do a leveling with that option. Level only within available slack. Let me say level is not able to resolve the leveling because there is no slack or not much slack available on that particular feasibility task. So if I say skip, you are able to see without affecting my project finish date, you are able to see that activity got pushed, but still there is some amount of overlap between those two activities. The second approach is, rather than going for slack, let's look at the second option. The second option says, if I have multiple resources who are working on the feasibility, you might want only the resource who is over allocated. His assignment alone needs to be pushed to a later date. If that is what your requirement is, make sure that you go for the second option. So let me give you a demo of that. Okay, so let me go to the resource, and I'm just going to have another resource. Okay, so this is just an example. So as you can see, there are two resources who are currently working on that particular task. Now, if I go for leveling options and I select the second option, which means it is only the assignment of business analyst, offshore business analyst, that will be adjusted to a new date. So let me say level all. Now you are able to see the task is getting stretched, which means the task start date is not getting pushed to a later date. To understand it better, I'm just going to change my view to resource usage. You will find, or maybe I'll change it to the task usage so that you can understand it much better. You can find on my task usage the feasibility that the resource SI is working on feasibility from this date, whereas if you look at offshore business analyst, he is working only from this date, which means its individual assignment start date and finish date is getting pushed to a later date. So if this is what your requirement is, maybe you would like to go for the option what I discussed. That is, go for leveling options, where you can say leveling can adjust individual assignments on a task. So I've just reverted it back to the old scenario. But as you can see, I cannot push this task to the last date because, as you can see, the offshore business analyst is the offshore business analyst, if you look at it, is available on the prepare SRS and the business process analysis. Naturally, I can push this task only on or after a particular date, effectively, which will push the critical path to a later date. So in order to do it, what I am going to look at is the third option, which means leveling can create splits in remaining work, which means the feasibility task will now be split so that one part of the work can be done when he is available. The second part of the feasibility can be done when he is available. So let me say level all. Now you can see, without affecting my critical path, I was able to split the task into two pieces. So this can naturally apply only for tasks that can be broken into pieces. Okay. So just to summarize what I've just discussed, you need to go to the resource ribbon, that is a leveling options, by which you might be able to go for the either automatic or manual. So when you say manual, please remember you are doing a one-time order. The second option we discussed is the order for a specific period. And the last one is the priority, which I discussed, ID only, standard, priority, comma, standard. And the last one is what is more important. If the task that is going to be automatically delayed should be within its available slack, make sure that the first option is ideally selected. If you want to ensure that only the affected resource assignment is getting pushed to a later date, make sure the second option is selected. The third option was useful if you want to split the task into small pieces. Okay, and these are the points which you ideally need to remember. So let me go back to project. So this is what you need to remember. So though you have seen that how to do leveling, right? As you can see, we made use of the level all options to do an automatic leveling. Okay, but there are many ways by which you can make use of the settings what you have used here. Remember, let's say if we have configured these settings, naturally, I can say, let's say for example, I can say leveling can create splits in remaining work, and I say OK, which means I've just saved the setting. Now I can just right click that feasibility and say reschedule it to the next available date. So the moment you say reschedule it to the next available date, project does not push the task to a later date. Rather, it uses the options what we have set in the resource leveling dialog box. So when you are going for any of the options to reschedule, make sure that these options are set properly. Otherwise, you might have surprises and confusion when it comes to leveling. Okay, so naturally we made use of these options like the leveling options. We also made use of the identifying the next over allocation. The third one is in case if you want to level this particular selection, which means later date. So you can use the leveling options in any of these views, that is either in the resource sheet or in the Gantt chart or on the team planner also. I just gave a demonstration of how to use it on the Gantt chart, but let me change my view to the resource located here. So I can just click on resource. I can say level resources. So when I say level now, project will try to resolve over allocation only for, if I change my view back to Gantt chart, you can see the task would have got automatically split because I have set the third option as leveling can create splits. The last one is you can also make use of the team planner where you can try to do it. So let me say I want to find the over allocation. Okay. Okay, so you might find some black color bars. The reason being the color of the bar is with respect to the current date of your project. So let me go to the project information and let me change it to an earlier date so that you are able to see it better. So here also you can right click that particular task and you can go say move to the when the resource is available. So which means the feasibility is now getting split into two pieces. So make use of both the manual options as well as the options what we discussed through which you can resolve the problems. So before I move on, let me take a few questions in terms of how we have understood this topic. So there is a poll available on your screen now. It talks about what do we mean by critical path. I'm giving you 15 seconds. Go ahead and choose what you think might be more relevant. Okay, good. So time up. So the answer I have received from 96% of participants is it is a set of activities that cannot be delayed. Yeah, exactly. So naturally, we need to ensure that we take care of the critical path when we do the resource optimization also. Good. So thanks for your responses. The next one, which I just want to validate, is when you assign a resource to a I'm giving another 5 seconds. Okay, good. So thank you. So I've received enough responses. So the answer I have seen is 62% of doing the work. We have already seen that Microsoft project's weaknesses, though it finds the critical path does not uh, take into account the availability of that particular resource, due to which we are having this problem. Let's look at the next one, which we have already discussed. So in Gantt chart, if you see a red colored stick man, what does it indicate? I'm giving another 10 seconds. Okay, good. So thanks for your responses. 97% have gone for the second option, which is ideally correct. When you see a red colored stick man, which means he's over allocated. But if you see a red colored bar, which means it falls on your critical path. Good. The last one, which I just want to show before I just summarize and take the questions. So the question is, what is the use of task inspector feature? I'm giving another 5 seconds. Okay, good. So thanks a lot to everybody. So 78% have gone for the third option, which is ideally correct, to inspect the factors of the particular task. Remember, your task inspector may not help you to identify the critical path accurately, or you cannot change the working time directly through that one. So it's predominantly used only to inspect the factors and resolve any resource conflicts. Okay. So before I move on to the questions what you have posted, so just to summarize, we said resource conflicts occurs when you assign more work to a resource than is availability. There are several ways by which you can do it. You can swap resources, or you can delay tasks, or split activities, or change their calendar. So these are some of the ways by which you can ideally make sure that the resource conflicts are resolved. One is you can make use of the overallocated report, Gantt chart view, resource sheet view, team planner, or the resource allocation view also. And finally, we also made use of the leveling options by which you can ask project to delay some of the activities based on the priority what you have set. So coming up, we have a Microsoft Project 2010 series, which starts at 6th of September. It's a 10 session where each session is going to be 1 hour. You would receive more details through the techgig.com where you can look at and register for it. So this is going to be a step-by-step option by which you can build a realistic forecastable schedule using Microsoft Project. In between the series, we are also going to have a live web Q&A where I will be answering some of the questions what you have on Microsoft Project on the topic what would be discussed on that particular day. Okay. So this is my email. My email is sai@sainivas.com. You can also reach me through my website, sainivas.com, and through my Facebook and LinkedIn page. So I am done with my content. So Mohini, are you available there? Can I take some questions?
Sure, Mr. Sai, you can take the questions.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the questions I've received enough questions. So the first question, okay, so are we getting the presentation? I will just push this presentation to my website, which you can look at. And the second is, how do you find and resolve resource overallocations support where resources are working on a 24/7 bar model where shifts are changed on a regular basis? Ideally, the way you handle this is you have two resources generally. Okay, one resource who is working on one shift, another resource. No, just have two different resources created, one for each shift, and that is ideally an approach what you can follow in terms of doing it. So, but in case if you are more looking at one resource changing shift every week, naturally you need to have so many resources. So let me give you an example. So let me change my to my project and okay, so let me say I am working during day shift and night shift. Okay, so let's say day and night. Okay, so in your day shift, ideally you can say my calendar, which I'm going to use is my standard calendar, whereas in my night shift you need to say I'm going to use my night calendar. Okay, so naturally, as you can see, you can have a different availability for the day shift and the night shift. This is one of the approaches you can follow. Another advantage you have in this approach is you can give a different timing, that is availability in terms of night shift and day shift also. The second one is okay, the third one, okay, in agile term, how do you create project charter where you create meetings and some meetings like 15 minutes? Okay, though this is not within the scope, but if you would like to have meetings like recurring activities in your project 2010, you have an option here called recurring task, where you can ideally say meeting for 2 hours and it happens weekly for end after 3 occurrences. So let me say Monday. So now you're able to find I have 3 meetings scheduled in the next 3 weeks. So this is how you can ideally do that. Okay, so the next one is how do you do resource leveling in product backlog? Okay. Ideally, I don't have much information about product backlog. Maybe you can write to me through my email. I can get more information about how this can be done. We had another question, how do you do resource overallocation? Does Microsoft project arrive at other project parameters cost arrive? Does the PM work manually? So Microsoft project, if you look at it, the leveling options, what you have seen here, does not look at the cost part of your MS project. Naturally, you need to do manually only, right? So if you look at my resource sheet, what we looked at here, so there's a cost information available. So you might want to look at the cost of that particular resource. So let me show you that so that I can, that's better. Okay, so let me change my view to resource sheet and let me give some values here. And if you want to look at the cost, just right click and say cost. You would be able to see how much of cost is remaining through which you would be able to solve the problems. Is overallocation practically acceptable in all stages of the project, and how is it applicable to Agile? Remember, Agile, it is more about, my understanding is people take ownership of their individual activities and you work on sprints. And naturally, there should not be a challenge for you for a resource being overallocated, because the sprints are much smaller and it is easy to manage compared to other types of projects. So you can ideally apply for any stage where you are having any critical deliverables where you might have an impact. To use this tool, is there any project size related to? I do recommend that if your team size is more than 10, okay, and if you are running a project for more than 1 month, ideally make use of this tool. If you are just running a project which is less than 1 month with less resources, less than 10, it can very well be managed manually without using Microsoft Project. But I do recommend if you are managing projects and programs, please go for Microsoft Project. Okay, is there any option to install Microsoft Project free of charge? No, not at all. It's a licensed software. You need to go to Microsoft.com and you can just download a trial version that is available for 60 days. And all the options which I showcased is available through the trial version. Second question I received was, is it possible to apply resource curve? Okay, distribution of resource time in a predefined manner. Okay, I assume that you're talking about the resource graph. Okay, so when you look at the view, you can change your view to what we call as a resource graph, like this. So if you look at my business analyst who is overallocated, I can scroll to that particular where you'll be able to find it. So this will ideally tell you more in terms of percentage. As you can see, your y-axis more talks about percentage. But if you'd like to more see in terms of hours, more like in a graphical manner, I recommend right click here and talk about work. This will tell you how much of work is he spending on those availability line. Right click and you can go to the bar styles where you can say show availability line here, so that you will be able to see even the availability of the resource and you can compare it. The next one is, what changes are there in project 2013? Yeah, there are many. I recommend you visit my website. I am doing a weekly update in terms of what features are available. So another one is resource over allocation specific feature only in project, or is it supported in other tools also? I cannot claim it, but if you look at Microsoft Project, it is having an end-to-end feature by which you can do leveling. So the other features I can say, if you're using some open source software like OpenProj, I doubt it is not having that particular feature what we discussed. Can this tool be used or useful for open source project? Can this tool used or useful for open source project, or as we are using? Okay, remember this is we are more talking about how to manage projects by using this scheduling tool. So the technology what you are trying to use might not be a specific constraint for using this particular tool. So the methodology is what is more important. Okay, so in Microsoft Project, is there a facility to preview the resource leveling before confirming? Okay, yeah, it is possible to some extent. I can say if I'm just looking at my Gantt chart, there is a view available in Gantt chart called leveling Gantt. Okay, so let me choose that. The way I access it is in this task ribbon, I went to more views where I selected leveling Gantt. So when I go to leveling Gantt, you are able to find that the tasks are now scheduled this way. But after I did a leveling, let's say I can say leveling create splits and do a level now, you are able to find some green color bars that are shown here, which will ideally tell you the before and after leveling. So the green color bars what you see on top is generally called as a pre-level task, whereas the one that is in the blue are generally called as the current tasks here. Good. So now let me look at the other questions. Okay. Mohini, are you there? I am not able to see the questions. Okay, I got it. Thank you. Okay, if there are two different shifts, 8 to 3, 3 to 10, then there is a general shift. How do we set it in calendar? Okay, so if you want to set it in calendar, I'm just repeating the same points. If you can just change your view to the resource sheet, and you can just double click that resource what you ideally want to change and go to working time. Here I hope you can ideally say Monday, you can say the working time is 8 to 12, 1 to 5, and you can also schedule from 9 to 1, and next day you can say midnight 12 to 1. So this is ideally the place where you can configure their shift with respect to your projects. Okay, so there are other questions available. Let me read as much. Okay, is there any way to deactivate some tasks if I want to overallocate? Yeah, yes, you can do it. So in project 2010, there is an option available to do it. So if you look at this example, what I showcased, the resource was overallocated, correct? So let's say due to some reason I want to deactivate. When I say deactivate, I'm not deleting this task. Rather, it's called as inactive task. So let me change my view. I can right click and say inactivate. So the moment to say inactivate, that task is inactivated, which means it will not contribute any effort or duration to your current project. So this is ideally an available. So this inactive option is also available only in project 2010 professional version. Is there any feature to set tolerance limit beyond which a resource is not shown as overallocated? Ideally, it is not possible. Naturally, if you want to say anything more than 2 hours, only it should be overallocated. Ideally, you can't do that feature. So strictly it goes by the availability units what you have seen here. So in the resource sheet, if you want to say a resource, though it works only 8 hours per day, it can take up even more than 8 hours work, let's say an additional 1 hour work. You need to ensure that you change this to 125%, which means the resource can work 10 hours per day on that particular project, but anything more than 125, it will be flagged as an overallocation. Can the individual resource enter their schedule themselves for a larger team? Okay, this is something which I'm not going to talk about. How can we export data to Excel, and where the team can provide an update through Excel and we can import it back. How do you calculate the schedule or effort variance? Okay, so I'm just trying to answer some of them, though it is outside the scope of this. So you have a table called variance table here. So through the variance table, you can look at the start variance and the finish variance of the individual activities. Can the same resource be allocated to 2 different calendars? No, that is not possible. In case if you have a requirement that I need to have 2 calendars, create 2 resources by the same name and have a initials at the beginning or prefix or suffix with a unique name so that you can use it. Here we discuss about critical path. I would like to know more about PERT in Microsoft project. So, but the short part in Microsoft Project 2010 is Project 2010 does not support PERT anymore. It's only in Project 3 and Project 7 PERT was supported. Okay. So if you need more details, please write to me. What algorithm does Microsoft Project use on parameters? Can we edit it? I am assuming that you are talking about the leveling options. So the way it is leveled is by making use of the options what we discussed here. So when you do automatic leveling, that okay. So any other questions? if I deactivate some task, will that overallocation go away? I think that was already answered. If overallocation feature was backward compatible, yes, it is compatible starting from Microsoft Project 2000. Okay. Okay. What happens to the leveled task when resources are replaced with multiple tasks? Naturally, when a resource gets replaced, naturally, if he's again working on parallel activities or outside the availability period, he will be flagged as an overallocated resource. Okay. Good. I think I have answered majority of your questions. So if you have any more questions, please reach out to me. My email ID is already shown on the slides. Okay, so I hope this 1 hour program was productive to each one of you. So please don't forget to sign up for the series where you would be able to learn more about Microsoft Project 2010. So over to Mohini, please. Thank you. Mohini, are you available?
Yes, Mr. Prasad. Well, thanks for your session on managing resource overallocations in Project 2010. It was indeed a great session. I would also like to thank all our participants for their support in making this webinar a success. The recording of the webinar will be available on techgeek.com by tomorrow. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.